Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to be talking about systems and tools for the series that I've been doing with Dr. Shayla Vradenburgh on what we wish we had known before we started our PhD. And I'm just going to remind everyone before we start, I did my PhD starting in 2001. So what I'm saying is archaic, and you should listen to Shayla when it comes to this sort of stuff. So you've been forewarned, and you may proceed to laugh when I tell you what I used to get up to. But Shayla, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, so my name is Shayla. I'm the CEO and founder of Revolting Science Resources, where the goal is essentially just to bring the principles of project management to academic scientists. But I'm excited today to talk some more about some systems and tools and things that I wish that I'd known before I did a PhD.
So this is Shayla's area of expertise. This is what she goes around and gives presentations on. So I encourage you to bring her out to your institution if you think that something like this is going to be helpful to you. It would have been very helpful to me because I had to come up with my own system. But again, I did this well over 20 years ago. And so what I did, I would definitely not encourage anyone to do in any shape or form. Listen to Shayla. But as I will just tell you what I did. And so obviously when you're doing your research, you read an awful lot of papers and you need to keep them all straight in your head. So which paper showed what, what year it was. A lot of the time, you're going to be referencing the same person, but different years. So I don't know, I'm going to throw it out there. Sleeth 2001, Sleeth 2003, Sleeth 2005. And you're like, wait, which did what? And you have to kind of keep them straight. And so to me, that was very challenging. I am not the sort of person who, as you're like talking, will just drop a citation and I'm like, oh, this is a great paper. It needs to be stellar in order for me to remember it. And obviously the majority of papers that you're thinking of are not going to leave you kind of amazed. So I actually had a Word document for every single protein that was involved in what I did. And then I separated each Word document in two sections. So, you know, I had kind of like structure and the things that they interacted with and other things. And then when I read a paper that I thought I would be citing at some point, basically all of them, I would then go to the document, find the area, and I would write a couple of sentences explaining what was the key finding from this paper, and then I would cite it. And then we did have EndNote back in those days. It wasn't that archaic. So I would add it to my EndNote library and I would have it there. And then when I went back and wrote my dissertation and other things, as I've said on other videos, my introduction got written basically over my first year because I wrote all of these different sections on the different proteins. And then I just had to update it towards the end of writing my dissertation. But for all of the other things, I would go back to all of these documents. I would look through, find the citation that I needed, and then I could just pop it in, which again, it took an awful long time to do these Word documents. I will say my favorite Word document was the one on chemicals and what they did and why you were using them. So I will suggest that you do something like that, because then you can look through. At least my professor wanted me to be able to look at the ingredients in a solution and know why each one was in there. And then I could then kind of alter it as I saw fit, depending on what I needed. But you can only do that if you know why all of the components are in the solution. And I know that a lot of people are just like, oh, I don't need to know that. But to me, it was very important. So my favorite document was literally a list of chemicals and what they did and their functions. And I would encourage you, if you don't have that one, you definitely don't need to make Word documents for everything, but that one, I think, is key, and you need to maintain it. So when you read something, it goes in, because if you like, I'll remember that, you won't.
Yes, 1000% agree with that last statement, especially. I think there's so many things I'd be like, I would be working on a protocol or just like how I analyze this piece of data, and I'd be like, I'll remember it next time. I need to do this. And I don't. I never remembered it. Write down everything, honestly. It's better that way. But I think too, in relation to citations, like I think it's so important to be very organized with them. I will say I did not use the Microsoft Word doc method, but I mean, I think at the end of the day, like all of the softwares and things that people use do the same thing. And my favorite was SciWheel, but basically allowed you to kind of like categorize different papers that you find by different subject areas or types or kind of like topics that you create. Then you can also like take notes. And so I would normally like write myself a note about like generally what the takeaway was for that paper. You could also like highlight parts of the paper so it's easy to find them later. And then it had a way that you could actually automatically add those citations to things like a Google Doc. And when I was writing papers and grants and everything, like my lab just used Google Docs for all of it. So it made adding citations super easy. But I think at the end of the day, like you mentioned, it's mostly just important that you know where to find the papers, you know what they told, like what they're actually about, because that's what you're going to need whenever you're writing a dissertation, a paper, whatever it is. So I think at the end of the day, even if it looks a little different or you use a different tool, that's the end goal. But I think one of the things I wish that I'd known before doing my PhD was just what project management actually is. And how you can use it to just help you get more done, but also do that with less stress. And so for anyone who isn't familiar, project management essentially is just how you manage a project so that you get it done. From start to finish, all the different components that go into actually completing a project. What do you need to do to get from point A to point B? Essentially, this is what I do for my business now. I talk a lot about project management. It's something I'm super passionate about. And mostly that's because it's a topic no one ever told me about when I was in my PhD program. I found out about it after the fact when I was actually doing like a really short training for a job that I took after I completed my PhD. And it was just so obvious that this is connected to what we do as scientists and researchers. And so overall, I think if I would have had a better understanding of what project management is and also how you can actually use it, I think it would have helped me to just be able to make better progress on my projects, but also just have the tools to better communicate with my PI or other people that I'm working with on things that need to happen, maybe decisions that need to be made, and also just making sure that there were some clear boundaries around like what is this project going to include, but also what is it not going to include. For me personally, that was like one of the things that was really tricky was as I'm wrapping up my PhD and a particular project I was working on, a lot of things got added at the last minute and started morphing and evolving into something much bigger than it was ever supposed to be. And I think if I would have had some of these tools at the beginning to just have a better sense of how I actually manage this and then also how I actually complete it, I think I could have had some better conversations with the people that were around me so that I did not add a million things into my project and get really stressed and have it take way more time than it should have.
Yeah, project management is definitely something you need to learn. I am probably very old school with this as well. I just make lists. So I just always have a list next to me, and it brings me so much joy as I check it off. But that also means that sometimes I have to rewrite the list and I just remove the things that I've already done. So it can be a little time consuming, but also when I did like if I had multiple experiments going at the same time, I would have, 2 sheets and I would have the different steps, how many times have I washed this Western blot, check, which antibody is on, that kind of thing, as I ran over here to split cells or do whatever I was, just so I could make sure that I remembered all the different steps.
Yeah, exactly. And I think too that like there's so much of that like dopamine hit of like completing things. But I think too that like what's really cool about project management is that it encompasses so much. It encompasses like the checklist and completing tasks so that you're actually making progress. But then it also encompasses like communicating that, like how do I share that with people so that they know the progress that I'm making. It also encompasses like how do I be prepared so that I have all the resources I need, like reagents or the equipment, materials, so that I can do this project really efficiently and not be like waiting on things. So I think like it's so big, and that makes it sometimes kind of daunting, but so valuable and so clearly connected to just kind of doing science, doing research, but also just living life. Like at the end of the day, everybody has some sort of project they're working on, whether it's curing cancer or it's helping plan your kid's birthday party. So I think there's so many just like tools that I wish I would have known before I got a PhD.
Yeah, because you learned about this after your PhD. So
Yeah.
that would have been helpful. So did you have the lists as you were doing everything?
Yeah. So I think what's also kind of interesting is like, even if you don't have any formal project management training or any of that, like at the end of the day, if you're completing a project, you're managing that project to some degree. I think there's just like a level of efficiency. And so I had like very much like handwritten to-do lists. That was at one point my thing. I eventually switched it up and I did like a platform called Todoist. That was one that I really liked. I switched it up again and I moved over to Notion, which is now my personal favorite. But I had a lot of lists. I had like a notepad that was like the whole week. It had like basically like slots for Sunday through Saturday. And I would write down like what I wanted to accomplish for different days. So like I had a lot of ways that I still manage my projects. They just were not the most efficient and they were changing a lot as I learned more things. And I think it would have just been nice to have something that I feel like is tested in all these other industries, but is more efficient and something I could use more from the beginning. So I'm not switching it up all the time.
Yeah, I don't think that project management is really taught at graduate school. So it would be very beneficial, and also to postdocs and other people that would benefit from this, so that you don't have to rely on lists and other things.
Exactly. And I think too, like that's one of the things about project management that is so interesting is just how applicable it is from undergrads to grad students to postdocs, all the way to PIs and running a whole entire lab. And so I think that it is something that they should teach. They should be teaching to more people. So if you're interested in that, I do give some seminars and workshops on it, but I think that this could be something that becomes a more formal part of education for graduate programs.
Yeah, and I will say, having seen Shayla speak, I will encourage you to bring her in. But there's also a lot of kind of acronyms and other things along with project management. So you're definitely going to need an expert to help you through this. I don't think that if I'd just bought a book on project management, I'd have been like, oh, this is easy. I think it helps having someone who is an expert in it to kind of help you through it. Is there anything else you want to add about the systems and tools before we wrap up?
I mean, I think we kind of just like touched on a couple of things, but I think there's so many tools that exist. And honestly, they are so like ever changing and evolving. And so maybe this could also be a great thing for people to comment on in the comment section and just share a little of some of the tools that they really like, some of the systems that they have that have worked really well for them. And that can maybe help out some other people.
Well, I think that's great advice. And thank you for joining me today, Shayla. This is part of a series, so please go to Shayla's YouTube. It will be linked to see the other ones. And I look forward to seeing you all again at some point soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.